take anybody's word for it. I greatly appreciate that. I backed way up and looked at all of Matthew 13 to try to get a better understanding of kind of what's going on instead of just zeroing in on each of these parables that we've been looking at. And I think that taking a closer look at this chapter is really important because this is a very critical passage for us to understand in the study of parables in general. There's a lot of things that Jesus says about what parables are in this chapter, and there is a great number of teachings that are going on in this chapter as well. I have it in my notes here somewhere. How many parables are just in this chapter is quite substantial. But my first question, as always, as we get into a study like this, is what is a parable? You should know this one by now. A story. A parable is a story.
Practical story, our times, deals with one spiritual idea.
Earthly story, something we relate to that is dealing with one spiritual topic. The way I like to say it is a earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Right? So that's what a parable is. A parable is something that is laid alongside something in real life, and it's calling us to change. It's calling us to change the way we look at the world. It's calling us to change the way we interact with that world. Now, understanding the parables, it is key that we understand the culture and the time that Jesus is speaking to, the audience, the original audience. And it's also important that we understand the context of what's going on. Now, when it comes to the gospel writers, New Testament and biblical writings in general, the biblical writers are not necessarily always being chronological, critical in their thinking. Right? So a modern view of the world, modernist view of the world, is facts and figures. Right? And it's pie charts, and it's charts, and it's graphs, and it's all of these things, and everything laid out very succinctly. That's not the way that biblical writers looked at the world. It's also not the way that postmodern says facts and figures don't matter as much as what you think, what you have felt and experienced. Biblical writers really take both of those things. So they take biblical truth, they take reality, but then they place alongside that and they highlight out of that reality certain facts that teach highlight. So there's times in the Gospels, depending on what's going on, that they'll highlight different teachings of Jesus depending on the audience and their theological messaging. So not everything is always in strict chronological order. Everything is what has been said, everything is true, but it's not in that strict chronological order. So we have to understand that is always a possibility anytime we're dealing with the text. However, when the text lays out timeline elements, the author is seeking to communicate an order of events. It is then important that you keep that order of events in mind, because the context then begins to stretch much further than just a couple of verses or a couple of sayings. It stretches to a larger context. Matthew 13 is one of these. In fact, the context begins in Matthew 12:15 Jesus moves into a house near Galilee. So he's in the house near Galilee. He's teaching, and it is here, as he is teaching, that his mom and brother show up. They want to talk to him. They want to straighten him out. They come to collect their crazy brother, right? And they've drug mom along to try to convince him to come with them. That's what's going on at the end of chapter 12. At the beginning of chapter 13, Jesus is moving out of the house towards the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd has gathered around him, even larger than the one that was gathered at the house, and he then teaches a parable. We have the parable of the sower. Now, Jesus then turns to his disciples who were in the boat, and they ask him, okay, what does that mean? Jesus gives us the definition and his explanation as to why he's teaching in parables. He then also gives them an explanation of the parable of the soils. Why he has given that. What that means. Jesus now turns his attention back to the audience that is sitting and standing near the shore, utilizing the acoustic amplification of water. He then speaks to the crowd again, and we have the parable that we're going to be looking at today, starting in Matthew 13:23. So all of this is in unfolding context, just like our brother mentioned last week. So the text is very clearly, Matthew is very clearly laying out, this is the order of events as they unfolded. Right? Now back to my point that I was making earlier, it is very possible that other things took place during this day that may be highlighted in any number of places throughout the other Gospels. Right? But Matthew is highlighting these order of events as they took place. Right? Think about John and his writings. He said that if everything were written down about the life and the ministry and the teachings of Jesus, the books could not hold them. Right? So there's lots of things that Jesus did and said that aren't written down for us. These are written down for our edification. These are written down for our education. Okay? So, that clear as mud. Questions, comments, debate, rebuke. Obviously, I'm not above rebuke. All right, so let's get into the text here then. So Matthew 13, we're going to start in verse 23. Let's see. 24, yes. See, I make all sorts of mistakes. I am far from the perfect Jesus. All right. Jesus told them yet another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in a field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds amongst the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted up and formed heads, so the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy has done this," he replied. The servants then asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you were pulling up the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds, tie them in bundles to be burned, gather the wheat, and bring it to the barn." Okay. This is often known as the wheat and the tares. We call this the parable of the weeds. How you want to label it. What is wheat? Right. grandfather used to be on a wheat harvesting cruise. They'd start way down here in Texas and then go all the way up into Nebraska. The grain would ripen. Right? Golden grain, right?
Yes.
You look at the Greek word here, and it means grain, and it especially refers to wheat. That seems to be what Jesus is indicating, but it could be any grain. What is these weeds?
Wild mustard seed. It's not a harvestable crop.
Wheat. Yeah. So the Greek word here. Yeah. So this kind of barreled or false. It's a false grain. Resembles wheat, except that the grain is black instead of golden color. So it looks similar when growing up, and then when it sprouts ahead, it becomes very apparent that it is different. It produces, what I understand, a very similar grain, just not beneficial for eating and consumption. So it spoils the whole crop if they're all gathered together. We have to keep them separate. So we're not just dealing with a wild mustard seed necessarily. We're not dealing with Johnson grass or stickers or goat heads or something like that. We're dealing with a counterfeit wheat. So so that is what we're going to get to, right? So she's jumping down to verse 36. I tell you what.
I'm trying to get through this parable.
It's only 22 minutes in. I got time.
Get started on another one.
I've got my notes for another one. All right. The other question that I think we need to ask before we get any further into this is the question of what is the kingdom of heaven? This is one of those that we have to really get straight in our mind.
So I hear about it. Man. That's the kingdom. Texas and man who sowed good seed. Apostle or
So the kingdom of heaven is more than just can be explained by a parable. So in order for us to begin to unpack the kingdom of heaven, we almost first have to take it both out of the parable and then put it back into the parable. Right? Because he's going to explain a portion of the kingdom of heaven. So what is the kingdom of heaven? So where you want to end up, this idea of eternity, right, of heaven. So one aspect of the definition of the kingdom of heaven is going to be that future place where God's rule and reign. That is too small of a picture of the kingdom of heaven. Just say it's future, to just say it is our hope.
yeah, because last week we talked about the kingdom of God is here, us.
Right. So the manifestation of the kingdom of heaven right now, church. But even that is too small of a picture to say that the kingdom of heaven is the church from the time of um, Pentecost all the way up until Jesus comes back, and then heaven, even that's too small of a picture of the kingdom of heaven. That's often one of the definitions given. But when we're looking at kingdom, we're talking about the rule and the reign of God, right? Jesus talks about this in his Sermon on the Mount as your kingdom come, your will be done. Will of God, the rule and the reign, the dominion of God is something that existed before creation, will exist after creation. It is God's rule and reign. Now, the manifestation of that rule and reign was manifest in the nation of Israel when they were obedient. Right? So there are periods of time where the kingdom of heaven was upon the earth in Israel. There is points in time where the kingdom of heaven was manifested on the earth in Abraham and his family, or in Melchizedek and his dominion. Right? So anytime we have people obeying and following and submitting their lives to the rule and the reign of God, we have the kingdom of heaven being manifest. Right? So the manifestation of the kingdom of heaven is your will be done, me, as it is in heaven. So that's the kingdom of heaven. Right? Now, understanding that aspect of it, we still don't really understand the kingdom of heaven, therefore we need the parables. Right? It's one of those things where you have to know what the kingdom of heaven is in order to study the parables, but in order to study parables, you got to understand.
In order to have
you got to understand both, right?
A better idea of what the kingdom of heaven is.
Right.
If I tell you, describe me what do you have a certain idea of what the kingdom of Egypt is. So I tell you, give me the Eastern kingdom, or the Aztec kingdom, or the Hawaiian kingdom. There's something within that that gives you an idea of what that is. You know, pyramids, or sacrifices, or you have chariots. Something about that that it tells you what it is. You know, when we see today, we call them cultures, but they're part of the kingdom of what that culture is.
Yes.
Because you have the American culture. Although people say America has a culture, America, you can tell an American, tell a French person, tell Irish. They're there, right? And when this is written, it's written at a time when people understood what kingdoms were. And they saw the Romans and their kingdom. And we know what a Roman kingdom would look like, right? We know how they dress, we know how they talk, we know what kind of a political stance they had. They had a senate, they had representatives, they had all this. The kingdom, the moment you roam in your mind, have an idea of what that kingdom is. So, if we bring that over here to God's kingdom, what do you see when you hear God's kingdom? What conjures up in our mind, other than angels and this type of supernatural? What do we see? And that's the part that we're trying to find when we hear the word kingdom of God. Because in all those kingdoms, there's a king, not voted on, names overall. His final word is, let it be written, let it be done. That's it. There's no arguing. If he said it'll be done, that's it. It will be done. Just like when the legionnaires told Jesus, I know what power is. I tell them come, tell them go, and they go. You say the word. So he understood what the kingdom, the power he possessed.
And yet, once we understand kingdom, right? Now when we think of kingdom, we're thinking of culture, we're thinking of architecture, we're thinking of language, we're thinking of all of these things, we're thinking of geographical location, both its growth and its shrinking. When we're thinking about the kingdom of God, we're not thinking about a geographical location. We're not even thinking about its architecture, right? The kingdom of heaven is like a cross, right? You go into all these medieval churches. All the churches are designed in this cross shape, and there's all sorts of imagery and symbolism that goes into this architecture. That's not what we're discussing here, right? All of Jesus and these teachings predate all of that. Right? Jesus being the only one who has ever seen and experienced and been a part of the kingdom of heaven in a true, real way, comes to his people who should be a part of this, who should understand it, and he's kind of going, okay, what do I see when I say the kingdom of heaven? What do I mean when I talk about the kingdom of heaven? And he's reaching in and he's grabbing these parables to try to put flesh on what it means to be a part of the kingdom. Sometimes he's talking in these parables about what you need to do, how you need to live. Sometimes, like here, he's explaining why the world is the way it is and how the kingdom is interacting with that world. Now, Jesus will go on and tell several more parables, and eventually the disciples are going to raise their hand and say, okay, time out. Go back to the tares, go back to this false grain and the weeds. What were you talking about? I don't get it. I'm sitting here, I've been thinking about it. I understand mustard seed. I understand leaven. I'm kind of following that. But what do you mean about the tares? So we can jump forward. Let's read starting in verse 36. Then he left the crowd, and he went into the house. The disciples came up to him, and they said, okay, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. And he answered them, one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. Good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. Weeds are the sons of the evil one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Okay, so he says, okay, let me give you the allegory key. These are the things these things mean. Jesus does this in the book of Revelation. If you pay attention, he will tell you what the imagery means. Right? John will say, I was standing on the Lord's day in the Spirit, and I saw one who looked like the Son of Man, and around him were 7 golden lampstands, and in his hand were 7 stars, and reading, and it says, okay, and the lampstands are, and the stars are, right? And you have a very similar thing going on. Jesus says, okay, time out, let me give you the key to this. So what is the field? It's the world. It is the whole earth, right? Throughout time, what is being described, right? What is the good seed, or who is the good seed? People of the kingdom, the righteous ones, those who are submitting their lives and following God. Right? Who are the bad seed, or what is the bad seed? The lawless. Those who are rejecting God, those who are going their own way.
Yeah, because we were all tares.
So we chose not to.
Right. So
No, we were reading.
it's easy for us to just divide. We're all tares. It's by His glory alone that He made us. wait a minute. We're dealing with hearts. Let them go together. Hopefully the carrots. Right?
Exactly. Hopefully the wheat won't turn into tares.
Exactly.
You travel over land and sea and create a disciple of yourself who is twice the son of hell as you, right? Don't want that, right? Okay. Who are the harvesters? The angels. Right? When is the harvest? End of time, the judgment. Who owns the field? God. So who is the sower? God is the sower. Right? He is the one who went out and he put what kind of seed in his field?
Good seed.
Good seed. He put righteous people into the world. We were all created good. We were all created righteous. Okay? Where did the bad seed come from then? The devil, Satan. Right? We were deceived. Right? So now that we kind of understand what's going on, let's go back to the text. So Jesus sets the stage. He says, okay, let me explain what everything is. And let me explain the parable. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels and will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. So what is Jesus trying to communicate in this parable? What's the point?
Kind of the story of how it started out and how we got to where we are and what is to come in the future when he returns.
As we're starting the series on Sunday morning of Genesis, right? We're starting right at the beginning.
Right.
All of that's very fresh on my mind. As we think about the creation, everything being created good, God creating this perfect world, man as the pinnacle of creation, and then we have the fall. Story that then unfolds. So, yes, I think that is part of what's going on here. What else? What is Jesus trying to communicate here about the kingdom of heaven? What's he trying to teach us? Okay, to be good. Right? You want to be the wheat. So you want to be good, but you're going to live among some who are not. Now, when the righteous, they're going to try to drag you down. An image that comes to my mind as we're talking about this, that may have come to the mind of some in Jesus' audience and may have been intentional on his part, is the vision of the king of Egypt when Joseph was called in to explain the dream. Right? You have the image of these ripe, healthy grains that are then swallowed up by these gnarly, evil-looking, sickly grains. Right? So you almost have this image of both of these grains sitting side by side. Now, as we live in this world and we look around us and we see the evil that's going on in the world around us, maybe you see the shortcomings of your brothers and sisters even in church who just see the world so differently than you do. What is often one of the things that we wrestle with when it comes to the way this world works?
Or trying to live a double life, and that is unfortunately not good for have to live a life that can be the example of the Christ-like life that we see, so that we are an example of the wheat that God put in the ground. And we need to fight back anything that would cause us to have any type of an image. We have to fight that back. We have to fight that urge. God never said it would be easy. He said it would be good, would be rewarding, would be our blessing. He never guaranteed us ease. And you said Sunday morning, at some point we need to let go and let God. We need to just give over to Him the things we can't handle. And then let's let it go.
And when it comes to our salvation, the only thing we can control is whether or not we remain faithful.
Absolutely. And that's on each one of us. I can't do it for you. You couldn't do it for me. You can't do it for anybody. We all have to do it for ourselves.
When we look around at the world around us and we see those who are going in a different direction than we are, and we see people hurting by that evil, I think there's often a draw within us to say, why will God not step in?
He putting that in front of you is His stepping in.
That could be.
Maybe
Right.
you're the one that's supposed to talk to that person and say, the reason you feel this way is because of this. And I can show you, you don't have to feel this way. I would love to help you. I would love to show you. To help you find peace. That's what I've often thought, Michael, is that I understand what you're saying, that oftentimes we say, well, because we've all heard, well, why did God allow that little child to be tormented like that? Well, maybe there was some way we could step in and help. Maybe He's giving us an opportunity to do more because we all know that the busy hands get the work. If you're busy, there's going to be something more that you can do.
Well, and I also think about what James said. Faith. What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no works?
Absolutely.
Right? You see a brother and sister without clothes or without need, right? You just say, well, I wish you well. Keep warm and be filled. I'll pray for you, right?
No, that ain't
And you don't even take the time then to stop and to be there for them. What good is that? Right? We see somebody hurting in our neighborhood. We see somebody struggling in our community, and we go, man, I wish that they would get out of my way, and I wish they'd stop doing that, and we just go on. Like you're saying, there's an aspect of this that is us putting our faith into practice. I love the Jewish view of benevolence. See this in the concept, staying with this imagery of agriculture, where you leave the corners of your fields. Because what you're doing in that is you're saying that I don't know why, but God put your blessing in my field. Come get it. Here for the taking. Yours. Right? That view that the one receiving is doing more for the community by providing an opportunity for the faithful to live out their faith, one giving does in his giving, in his contribution, turns our way of thinking about benevolence on its head.
Was that a law or was that
Which?
the field?
The field?
Yeah.
The field, the fact that you had to leave the corner of your field was a law. The amount, and here's one of the funny things, the amount of how much of your field corners you leave is up to you. But it's also visible to the entirety of the community. So you think about the parable of the man who had this booming crop. He said, man, where am I going to put it all? I'm going to have to tear down all my barns and build bigger ones. God put other people's blessings in your field, and instead of saying, I'm just going to fill my barns to capacity and be like, come and share in my blessing, no, you're going to hoard it. Right? And Jesus' point in that is, you foolish person, your soul is required of you this very night. You're not going to get to receive and enjoy any of it anyway.
But well, that's the problem with the heart of man. Because they were supposed to rest that land for 7 years, but they would sell it. And the Bible, I just bought it. It hasn't been sold. I might as well start sowing. And they would, the Jewish nation at the land somehow manipulate the way the land would rest. And that's part of the thing that Jesus came to point these things out. That's why they turned the temple into a den of thieves, because that's what they were doing with all these things. So, it's I don't want us to have the idea that somehow we should somehow feel bad or do things out of guilt, because the one thing that the kingdom of God, there's one thing that shines above all things. Love is love. You see the kingdom of God, because that's the motivator. That's what motivates God to create, God to be with us, and God to sacrifice. And once we choose to follow Christ, it is His love that motivates us to do. Right? So if we're not gonna if we're not doing it out of love, if we're doing it out of guilt, then we have to think about it. Because there were many lepers, right, in the time of in the Old Testament, right? But only one got healed. And there were many blind people in the time of Jesus. Not everybody received that. So we have to be also not use guilt or feeling sorry to motivate us to do things. It has to come from love.
Well, and getting back to the text, what Jesus is pointing out is, I think, a criticism that is often layered and lowered at Christians. If Jesus is in charge, if he is on the throne, if he is king, if his dominion is current, why is the world at war? Why is injustice reigning? Why are people hurting? Where's God?
They're not
Right.
part of and they're not part of the kingdom of God.
Right, and the ones layering that debate is often not a part of it.
Since they're not part of the kingdom of God, they don't have to follow the parameters placed forth by the kingdom of God.
Right.
Because when we become part of the kingdom of God through baptism, love, right? Love one another. These are the parameters that are given us by Christ. No, there's a new law that I need to give you guys. Love one another. And that's part of the kingdom of God. But mankind is not part of that kingdom. So they don't have to follow those. Because their kingdom is manipulated by Satan himself. And is placing all these thoughts and ideas in their mind. And they're just acting upon it, just like the snake. If you will not die if you take that. But you don't need God to have a life. You don't need God to be happy. You don't need God to be fulfilled. These are the songs of the sirens in the world of man. Them being part of the kingdom of God.
But I think the reason that Jesus is telling this parable is a refutal of that criticism, right? Because you see that God's not the one who brought evil into the world. We look in Genesis, and it's us, our rebellion, that causes this problem, right? It is our selfishness, our rebellion against God that causes this. And then the question is, okay, well, why are these things continuing to rise up? And Jesus uses one of his fellow workers who comes along and notices this, right? Just like one of the 12 prophets, right? And saying, "Where's your justice, Lord? Your people are just completely wicked." Right? He says, "No, don't worry about it. I'm sending the Babylonians. They're going to come and destroy them." Right?
But in this case, we have the...
Oh, we're all creatures of free choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what the deal is that some people choose to do bad, or the way they were raised, what are their influence. They're evil. I mean, they're evil, or they're neglectful children, or they abuse people, or whatever. So we're creatures of free choice. That's what God didn't want a bunch of robots. He wanted people to voluntarily obey Him and love Him and not be forced to be programmed. So some people choose to follow God, and some people choose to follow the evil thing.
In this case, he's saying that the good Christians are in this world with those who are still evil.
Right.
And we cannot just go in and just snatch the evil out of that, because we will tear up some of those who may not be strong Christians, maybe weaker Christians, but haven't matured yet. So until we get everybody to maturity, until we get to the end of days where everybody is at maturity, both evil and good, will not destroy the crop.
And the owner of the field, God in this situation, is saying, "I'm still in control." It doesn't matter what wicked thing they do or they don't do. It doesn't matter how healthy the wheat is or how healthy the tare is. They're all going to be dealt with on that last day. Fear not, I'm still in control.
What's the responsibility of
To bear fruit. And in the case of Jesus saying, "I am the vine, you are the branches," your responsibility is to abide, and in the process of abiding, we then produce fruit. And this is a key point this year as we consider ourselves under construction. Right? Our responsibility as Christians is to abide. We abide. We remain faithful. The result of that should be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. The result of that should be that you add to your faith virtue, to your virtue knowledge, to your knowledge brotherly kindness and love, and increase evermore in these things. Right? So abiding, being faithful, should look like maturity.
And in that maturity, we are going to be fruitful. We will teach other people. We will help people that will then seek to find out what the truth is. And that'll give us an opportunity to help them, but also that gives us an opportunity as well.
But I think it's important to understand, especially within this parable, that the imagery and the message is not, how will you multiply the wheat harvest? The question is not, how are you going to deal with the tares?
Right?
The point is, God's in control. He owns the field. He planted the good seed. Yes, he knows that there are weeds, there are tares amongst the wheat. They look an awful lot alike. Right? But God knows the heart.
most humans do?
They do. Right? They do. So, the point is that God's in control. God's in control, and everyone will be fairly judged. So the call to the one who is in the kingdom is to not doubt that God is in control, and to abide and bear fruit. And that bearing fruit is not that you're creating more Christians. Not that you're sharing your faith. That is a part of your Christian life, but that's not part of this parable. Right. And similarly to the parable that precedes this one, right, we have the teaching of the soils, right? And the question is not, how are you going to change another person's soil? Right? You're sitting in the pew, you're listening to the preacher preach, you're listening to Jesus talk, you're reading your Bible, and you're saying, okay, how am I going to change my neighbor to be good soil? You missed the point. Right? The question is, what kind of soil are you? Will you produce a crop 100 times what was sown? Right? The question is, are you going to abide and be wheat, or are you going to be tares? That's the question. It's not, how are you going to change those around you? The question is, and I think it's important to understand the larger context of kind of what Jesus is getting at here, because it starts to kind of snowball on top of each other and pack. Right? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Right? It's small, it's inconspicuous, and yet it grows up and it is plentiful. It is flavorful. It is valuable. It provides for even the wildlife.
Came from a very small
seed.
a very small act of kindness to create a big event in someone's life. Just like, don't doubt those little seeds of kindness.
Little acts of faithfulness, that little acts of abiding.
Yeah, it's just
Right.
little. Look. Christianity was started by Christ, one man. Had 12 apostles. Now we have over 1 billion people who believe. That's amazing. How from a little seed, a mustard seed in Bethlehem, Galilee, over 1 billion people believe in Christ, and it keeps growing. And yes, it may not look like a big thing in our life. Well, there's 10 big things, but it's always the small things that we sometimes don't think will have any effect. That any small kind of kindness to your hungry neighbor may help soften that soil.
Will you abide? Will you live out your faith? Will you bear the seed, fruit of the Spirit? That's really the question. Ultimately, we need to do. God's the one who brings. God's the one who brings. Okay. Thoughts, comments, and rebuttals.
He was saying that thing about, we think, well, that's 10 billion people, so 1 billion isn't all that much. But if you're one person standing in among that billion people, you have a different image of. The same is true on, major sporting event where you have 60,000 people. One person. It's true that we as human beings, unless we work with numbers all the time, really have no idea. A long time ago, they used to talk about 6 sigma quality, that one error, a million occurrences. But people don't have an idea of what that is, because you don't work with numbers like that.
And that will come up again when we get to the parable of the leaven.
Oh, yeah.
Edna won't let me get into it this evening because I'm out of time.
Now we're just stuck from the smallest. I chose you, Israel.
I was wondering who the timekeeper was.
Israel for being the smallest and most insignificant. Right?
Mike, zip it.
There's always one of the mics coming from.
On the planet of the earth.
I love you, Mike.
They just, God does great things.
All right, let's pray, and you guys can come up and we can talk after. Father, I come before you today. I thank you so much for all that you do. I thank you that you came and that you were willing to give up heaven to be among us. That you loved us so much that you were willing to amongst us, suffer to redeem us, part of your kingdom. Lord, as we continue to expand your kingdom and our part in it, how we ought to live, help us to